Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I'm actually excited about this one because with me, I have an aquaponics farmer. Matter of fact, we're recording this episode at his farm, New Way Aquaponics in Memphis, Tennessee, just right on the edge of Midtown. There's a lot, Daryl knows a lot about everything, so we're. So it's been a pleasure actually working. I work for an organization, release space from him, and it's been really nice having him being able to talk and ask questions. So I'm really excited about this. So without further ado, Daryl, I'll just kind of have you introduce yourself, and then we'll just kind of talk about aquaponics. And I didn't know anything about aquaponics before I met you, but I did know about hydroponics.
Right.
So I guess hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later on and stuff like that. So yeah, anyways, just go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and how.
Well, my name's Daryl Leven. I own New Way Aquaponic Farms. We're in Midtown Memphis, Tennessee, and I call myself the head nurturer because in aquaponics, it's a science, but it's also an art. So we have to just put three separate organisms together. We start off with fish, we have bacteria, and we have plants, and we get all three to work together. So it's a simple way of doing it, and we do it based on a saying, one man's poop is another man's food. And that's truly what it's all about. So if you think about how we breathe oxygen that comes from trees as far away as the Amazon forest. And we in turn take in the oxygen and we breathe out CO2 that the trees and plants use. So our lungs are pooping CO2 that the trees eat for their photosynthesis process. So one man's poop is another man's food. So how does aquaponics work? Pretty simple. I start off with fish, and you can use any fish, but I generally use tilapia because it's a fish that doesn't mind being farmed. And by the way, tilapia is an ancient fish from the northeast part of the continent of Africa, and it's also in the Middle East. So just a point of reference, 98% of all the fish mentioned in the Bible are tilapia because that's the fish of that region. So we start off with tilapia. I feed the tilapia. They then pee and poop, and I'm looking for the liquid ammonia in their pee and poop. That is turned by naturally occurring bacteria, and there's two types of them. Nitrosomonas eats the ammonia, and it poops nitrite. Another bacteria comes in, Nitrospira. It eats the nitrite, and it poops nitrate. Nitrate is plant food, and the plants are in water that is either being fertilized by the fish or they're in the common water with the fish. They then absorb the nitrate and return clean water back to the fish. So it's an ecosystem as well as a process of growing food. So most people who use aquaponics, they use it to grow food. Some use it to grow fish too. I use it for both. So after about a year and a half after my fish have been doing their job pooping and fertilizing my plants, I sell the fish. They'll be about 1.5 pounds, and they'll be about this size. So it's a good deal. I sell the fish. I sell the plants at farmers markets. We grow a lot of leafy greens. Those are the vegetables that are the easiest to grow in aquaponics, and we start off from seeds. So I go from seed to harvest in about somewhere between 40 and 55 days. So I have a continual harvest by planting every week. By planting every week, I always have something to harvest every week. This summer, though, I wasn't always the best planter. I got lazy and didn't plant every week. And this happens to be a week when I'm doing this podcast where I should be at the market, but my plants just aren't ready yet.
Because I guess you said you plant like 3 weeks in advance, right?
I've got to plant really 4 to 5 weeks in advance, or 4 to 6 weeks in advance, yes.
Yeah, way ahead of time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, I guess, for not being at the farmers market. You agreed to be here and record this episode.
Excellent, right.
So how did you let's go back a little bit. How did you get into aquaponics farming? Like, did you do this your whole life, or
So I'm retired from corporate America where I worked in manufacturing and I ran businesses for my company and as well as plants. And God put in my heart to look at in an urban environment, to look at food insecurity in an urban environment. And I didn't know what that meant, but I was driving through Midtown Memphis and I noticed there were a lot of people on their way to dialysis in motorized wheelchairs with one leg. And these are people who are going to one of the 20 spots in 1 square mile in Memphis for dialysis alone. And I'm thinking, wow, and look at this. There's a fast food place on either side of the dialysis. And I'm thinking, had these people known that there could have been a better way to eat, to take care of their bodies and everything, would they have made better choices? So that's the journey that God put me on. So I tried to look at soil farming initially, but in an urban environment like the city of Memphis, it's hard to get land. So I found aquaponics and hydroponics, and we'll explain the difference between the two of them in a minute. But I found it as something I could do indoors in a building. So I ended up buying this building that we're in now. It's about a 5,000 square foot building, cut up. It's really old, it's 65 years old, cut up into small rooms. But I use 2 grow rooms, I'd say about 700 square feet, that I grow horizontally in. I don't grow vertically yet, but I'm getting ready to grow that way too. But I grow via aquaponics and hydroponics. I grow plants, leafy greens, herbs, things like that I sell at the farmer's market. And again, so between 45 and maybe 65 days from seed to harvest. So it's a good thing. So I'm doing it because God put me on this path to see if we can teach, and this is what we do. We're in schools, we work with groups, nonprofits, to allow them to know that people can make a decision on getting the most nutritious food they can. The reason why our food is not as nutritious in supermarkets is, even here in Memphis, most of our food comes from California. So most of our produce comes from California, and the food is literally dying the whole way there. So I'm guessing from the time it's harvested to the time it gets to your refrigerator, 2.5 to 3 weeks.
It's a long time.
Long time. Whereas when you buy food from me, I have harvested it that morning. And it's very nutritious. It has flavor. And one of the things that commercial ag doesn't look for in seeds or in plants is they're looking for plants that can travel far, so they can travel well. And they look for them to be uniform in size, uniform in color. So when you go to a Kroger is one of our big supermarkets here in Memphis. When you go to a Kroger, you look at all the tomatoes, they all look alike. You look at all the peppers, they're all the same color. I mean, of course you have green peppers and orange peppers and yellow peppers, but within that category, they're all the same. But if you go to a farmer's market, you pick up a pepper, oh my God, it looks ugly. It could be small, it could be large, it could be flat, it could be horizontal, vertical. I mean, it could be anything. But it's got one thing that our really food and supermarkets don't have, and it's a lot of flavor. One of the reasons is the seeds that are used for commercial harvest they have to be able to travel far. And then secondly, they've got to be uniform, but I never mentioned flavored. The seeds that farmers use locally for farmers markets, flavor first. We don't care what it looks like. We want it to be the most flavorful and the most nutritious plant that one can get. Just very different.
Yeah, it is very different. And it's interesting to think about that because, growing up in the States, you like supermarket, like all the food is like, well, like the presentation looks really nice. Like they all look uniform, like to your point.
Right.
But it's kind of like, well, what about the nutrition? Is it actually nutritious?
Right. So you have to give up something in order for them to be uniform and beautiful. You're giving up nutrition. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can't add nutrition back in, but again, the reason why I don't bash big ag is this. In the U.S., our agriculture industry is really set up to do one thing, to feed as many people as possible. And that's all it's made up for. Whereas local farmers and people who you would buy from at farmers markets, they're trying to provide you with the best product, just the best tasting, the best nutrition product. So very different. They're not trying to feed the masses. But look at what's going on in California now. You see fields, green field here, dirt field there. How 7 states got into a deal with sharing the water. I mean, they don't have enough water. I think we're going to have to get back to where we were 100 years ago. We have to grow food, and I'm not trying to take jobs away from California. We need to grow food and products that come from California around Memphis when it's a good time to grow in Memphis. When it's not a good time to grow in Memphis, a lot of people don't realize we do have winter here. It does snow, it does have ice. When we're in that season and we're outside growing, we can't grow. So let's bring the products in from the West Coast then. So there are times to balance this all, and it would also allow us to reduce our carbon footprint. Not as many trucks are on the road or not going as far if we could do it locally.
So, how come, I mean, that makes sense. How come not as many people know about aquaponics?
Well, you know, aquaponics is with fish, and let me take this time to describe what aquaponics is. It comes from two words. The first word is aquaculture, which means farming of fish. Okay, so that's just, people have been farming fish for thousands of years. We grow fish and we raise fish in small areas, and that's like we farm crops, we farm fish. So that's where aqua comes from. Ponics comes from the word hydroponics, which is misused all the time. Hydroponics means only one thing: growing in something other than soil. But most of the times it's used as growing in water, which is one of the ways you can grow. But there are different ways that one can grow in water. You can grow in air. You can grow in different things that are not soil. In fact, what I do is I grow in what's known as coco coir, which is a ground up coconut shell. So imagine this. We have an insatiable appetite for coconuts and coconut meat and coconut milk. Most of it comes from Thailand, Vietnam, all those countries in Southeast Asia are big coconut producers. So for hundreds of years, they've been farming coconuts, but they would throw away the shells and the shells would just exist. Someone thought of what happens if we ground up the shells? And it ends up being a substitute for soil to start plants in because it absorbs water very much. So the difference between aquaponics and hydroponics is this, and I'll use it the way most people use the word. In aquaponics, we use the fish as the fertilizer. Fish and bacteria end up being the fertilizer of the plants. In hydroponics, we use a reservoir of water of which we pour the nutrients into the water. And the nutrients in the water is what's used to fertilize the plant. Because the plant needs soil. When you're growing in soil, all the nutrients and everything comes from the soil. So that's why you see farmers putting fertilizer into the ground where the ground might be lacking some of those nutrients. In aquaponics, the fish and bacteria provide those nutrients. In hydroponics, you have to do it, a liquid form of nutrients are poured in, or I don't want to use the word chemicals because we all freak out when we hear chemicals, but it is a chemical-derived nutrient is poured into the water, and that is what's used to fertilize the plants in both that are growing in water.
So, Daryl, you were very unapologetic about the quality of your lettuce and of your produce,
Right.
But also like education. It's a big part of what you do here. Like you have people coming into the to the farm. You give them tours. You talk about like the process of aquaponics.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think with climate change and like during the pandemic, like there was no food, right? The groceries were running out.
Correct.
Like trucks were not driving around.
Correct.
Do you think that's kind of the beginning of people starting to pay a lot more attention?
Yes.
To some of the options?
People, one of the best things that happened to farmers markets was this. During the pandemic, people wanted to know where their food was coming from because they couldn't get it in the grocery store. So they really started to frequent farmers markets more. And one of the things they found out is the cost of food in a farmer's market is substantially higher than the cost of the food in a grocery store. And why is that? The farms that grow most of our food are corporate farms. So think of it as a corporate farm factory. We have this thousands and tens of thousands of acres are growing one or two products. And boy, they grow at such a scale, and they put all these fertilizers in the ground. They put all these herbicides in the ground to kill the weeds. They put all these pesticides on the plants to kill the pests to increase their yields. Most local farmers grow in a more organic friendly way. They try not to use herbicides. They try not to use pesticides. Whatever ones they use are registered under a group called OMRI, which is a group that says this is still as natural as could be to repel a pest or to repel a weed. So what's happened during the pandemic is the public became more aware of the food and farmers market, but they also said, why? It comes at a higher cost. But this is what I want to say about farming. Unless you're growing on a factory farm, farmers don't make money. The average farmer, and this is all throughout, if you were to take every type of farmer, a small farmer to a large farmer, on an on a net income basis, the average farmer in a year makes $40 an acre. That's no money.
And the work, the time that they have
and
to
the
put
work
into it,
that takes 12 hours a day, right? You have to tend to your crops. You have to do all these things. So it's not that if farming was very lucrative, we'd all be farmers. It's like people who like to trade stocks and everything. Boy, people just started trading online because it was easy in hopes of making money. No one started doing farming online or farming because there's not a lot of money in farming. But those of us who do it on a smaller basis, we try to educate people that maybe some of the sicknesses, some of the cancers, some of the illnesses and everything that's abound in our society right now could be due to what we eat. And if that premise is true, then we want to eat the best food that we can. We want it to be pesticide-free and herbicide-free. Anything that ends in the word side is like poison. If we think that we're only killing the bugs, if we feel we're only killing the weeds, let's not fool ourselves. It hurts us too, but not to the same extent. We don't see it right away. But I think we're getting smart now. People are more concerned about, we wonder what happened to all the bees. All the bee colonies are collapsing. Why is that? Well, there's a lot of pesticides out there. I'm not saying that's the direct cause to it, but that's a fact. When I was a kid, there were butterflies all over. Every time you as a kid went out, we'd have jars, we'd catch butterflies. Now, unless you're walking in the woods in Memphis, you don't see butterflies. I don't know what happened to them, but I'm thinking that it's the pesticides. The easiest thing for us to do is go to, say you have tomato plants at home and you see bugs on them. You go to your Home Depot, you go to your Lowe's, and what do you get? You get things like, you get pest control, and it'll kill the pest. But it kills all the good pests too. There's good pests and there's bad pests. Even Roundup, which is a weed killer. Roundup is one of the best weed killers ever. It has allowed farmers to grow and increase their yields by a lot. But the residue, the state of California has said, hey, it might help. It might be one of the factors of cancer in folks and people. So I'm just saying there's a different way of growing. People, getting back to what you said, I think that the pandemic helped people look at growing in a different way, and it helped people to think about what is put on their food that they eventually eat. You can't just wash it off, okay? I mean, and most of us, when we're washing our veggies and stuff, just rinse it real quickly and that's it. It's almost like the 5-second rule when things drop on the ground, right? You say, hey, if it's been there for less than 5 seconds, it's good to pick up.
See, I don't know if this was you or if it was somebody else that I was talking to, but somebody said, like, even with apples, for example, because they spray them.
They spray them with wax.
On the shelf, yeah. But then even when you clean it, it doesn't.
You can't. You have to scrub it.
Yeah.
You have to scrub it, right? So I mean, and one of the reasons for that is this: the apple will spoil quickly if it's not sprayed. And again, what did I say? You have to have in a supermarket a perfect fruit, right? Or we as consumers have been kind of like indoctrinated into not buying the imperfect fruit, to not buying the imperfect produce. We don't do it.
So it's a beast that we as consumers are feeding.
Yes, like, yes, and we tell the supermarket, hey, that's bad. I'm not buying that. Yeah. Or how do we tell them? Because we don't pick it up.
I don't pick it up, yeah.
Right. So, or if it looks weird, we don't deal with it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They teach us things and we believe it, and then we take it to a different level. So it's a circle. But I think we have made, over time, we have gotten back into wanting to grow. And think of it, 100 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, but probably not that much longer. We live in Memphis, and I'm not sure, Amito, if you knew this, but the modern grocery store was started right here in Memphis, Tennessee.
Is it Piggly Wiggly?
Piggly Wiggly was the first grocery store, the modern one, where people could go down aisles and pick things. Heretofore, though, what people would do is this. They'd have little gardens in the back. They would grow seasonal crops in the back, and they would do something that we don't do anymore. They would can them. They'd put them in jars. They would preserve them. So in the winter, what people did, they didn't go to the grocery store that much. They only went to the grocery store in the summer and winter to buy the staples, to buy the flour, to buy the milk, because most people didn't have cows in their backyard. And they would barter and trade, too. If you knew someone who had cows, you go, hey, I've got some crops here that you might want. I've got corn, I've got tomatoes. How much milk can I get for that? How many eggs? I mean, even now in Memphis, I mean, I hear chickens when I'm driving through Memphis. You hear the rooster all the time. Why? Because people are keeping hens. They want to grow their own eggs. And the eggs look different than the ones that come from big ag, right? The eggs, they have bigger yolks. The eggs are brown. They're all types of colors. They could be blue. They could be all types of colors. But again, what are the average eggs that we buy in a grocery store? They're either all white or they're kind of like a light brown. Mm-hmm. And that makes us think, oh, that's got to be better. It's a farm egg. No, it's a brown egg. That's all. And they're all the same color.
So I'm going to digress here a little bit until I may have already told you this story. But just this year, because one time I think we had some friends over at our house and we were making eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Then I said, how come I never cracked, so I'm not from here, by the way,
right.
I guess most of you guys already know. But growing up in Sudan, we raise chicken, we grow our own food, raise chicken, and then we eat the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes you have to be careful because if you wait too long when you crack the egg, there's a what do you call it? Like the chicken starting to form.
There's a fetus. There's a chicken in there, right?
Yeah. But that's never happened, and I just never really thought about it. So that I was like, oh, that's I've never cracked an egg here in the U.S. and like found a fetus inside of the egg, and then the friend was like, because here I guess they what is it called? They what's the word that I'm
fertilization?
Fertilization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I thought that was fascinating.
So that's perfect. Most people don't know. So I was at a class where we were teaching local people who wanted to raise chickens how chickens work. One, so we're talking about it, and then I didn't realize we needed to go back to basics. One is this. Most people don't realize there's a difference between a rooster and a hen. The rooster is the male chicken. He's the defensive one who makes all the sounds in the morning. The hen is the female, okay? So here in America, we raise chickens for two reasons. We either raise them for meat or we raise them for eggs, okay? So getting back to your example with eggs, if a chicken has been fertilized by a male rooster, the egg has the potential of becoming an embryo, okay? But if you get it early, it won't. But in the way we do commercial chickens, there are no male roosters around. It's just thousands of hens given this much space, about a half square foot of space to live their entire lives. Chickens go from chicks to harvest in about 35 to 45 days. They pump them up with all the medicines and everything and food and hormones, but they're there to produce chickens, right? So it's done in a different way. So those are chickens that are used for, those are feed chickens. Eggs are different, but still, they don't have that much space. And we hear about free-range chickens. Those are, a local farmer will have a free-range chicken that has a large area to feed on, which makes the quality of the meat that much better. And when a chicken only is growing up in a half square foot of space, the meat doesn't taste as good due to the hormones that the chicken produces as a means of, it's just a defensive thing. Like, we all do that. We all don't want to be cooped up. So it's very similar.
As a documentary filmmaker, chicken farms are very serious about not having any kind of recording devices around there.
Never. And it's not that they're abusing the chickens. And I want to say that again. America is about growing as much food as possible. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. Okay. But here it is, Amito. Are you aware that 40% of all the food that is grown, either raised for meat, raised for eggs, or produce and things like that, 40% of all the food that's grown is wasted, is thrown away.
That's a lot.
Why do we have hunger in America if we're throwing away, for different reasons, all along the value chain or all along the food chain? If we're throwing away 40% of all the food, couldn't we feed more people? What if we could just throw away 20% of the food? I would think that hunger in America could go away. But we've got to do it locally. We can't just send everything from one state to all the rest. We've got to think of solutions in a different way. And this is the journey God put me on. It was beyond aquaponics and hydroponics and growing produce. It was also looking at the entire food chain. How can we better do it and have food justice? There's a lot of food injustice that's created because a lot of people don't have access to food. But even if they had access to food, and we've seen this in books, we've seen this in studies, our lives, the way our lives are structured. You have how many girls, Amito?
3.
You have 3 girls. And I'm sure the girls have different activities, right?
Yeah.
So because you and your wife have got to take them to different activities in different places, at the end of the day, you might not have time to all sit down and have dinner together. You might have to pick up fast food here and fast food there. And again, I'm not trying to bash fast food because it has its purpose too, but we need to eat better nutritiously dense food by sitting down and having meals together. But we can't because we feel, oh, my daughter here has got to go to ballet. We have the other one at soccer. We have the other one involved in plays. How do we do 3 things and there's only 2 of us? Mm-hmm. Someone's got to stay and do it. And I mean, 100 years ago, there weren't as many activities. I mean, so people would have the family dinner. People would have the family breakfasts. Lunch, that might be a little bit sketchy, but until we change what I call our society and how we operate in society, some people have commutes that are 50 to 60 miles because the city they work in is too expensive for them to live in. They cannot go home and cook a nutritiously dense diet every day because they're driving 2, 3, 4 hours and commuting. We've got to change that. It's always more than food, but aquaponics and hydroponics is a way that anyone can grow whatever space you have, a limited amount of food or a certain amount of food indoors 12 months out of the year. You can grow every day because we all live in conditioned environments. Most of our houses don't get below 65 degrees in the winter. Most of our houses don't get above 80 degrees in the summer. Perfect for all crops all year round. That's what makes aquaponics and hydroponics great. You can do it all year round. And depending on how much space you have indoors, you can supply yourself with at least some of your diet, not all of your diet.
Which actually is a great point. So besides being a farmer and someone who's like made his way up the corporate ladder, Daryl's also, he's an entrepreneur and he builds systems.
I build systems for people to grow in, indoors. So if you only have a space that's maybe 1.5 feet by 1 foot, you can grow in that space, and maybe it's like 2.5 feet high. You can grow on a kitchen countertop.
So you don't have to own a aquaponics farm.
No, you would just need to devote a lot of space. I mean, there's a lot of people. When you buy a house, there's one thing everybody says: if it has a formal dining room, we'll never use that space. Well, wouldn't that be a great space to have a little aquaponics or hydroponics set up growing food? You can grow it anywhere in your house, but it's how we choose to use things. We all have spaces in our homes that we don't use. That's a perfect growing place. You don't need that much. Now, you might need a light because, of course, our plants need light, and you might need a fan too, but outside of that, that's about it.
So with like the pandemic, with the supply chain issues, and then I guess like now with all the health issues that Americans are dealing with, there's another component, which is the entrepreneurs that are willing to come up with the ideas and the solutions to feeding America better. And this is where people like yourself come in, because I mean, I've seen you work building your systems and stuff like that. You know, sometimes it's, you know, something's off, one measurement is not right. It's like the frustration, but that's what it takes, right?
That's what it takes.
So then the consumers, they come in, they order the stuff, but they don't know all the work that it took for you.
Correct. That's why farmers don't make a lot of money, okay? Because it takes a lot. I mean, even an existing farmer, they don't make a lot of money unless you have thousands and thousands of acres and can really scale up. Those are the ones who make money. The small farmers, 100 acres and less, they aren't making money. Yep. They might make enough to sustain themselves, but it's not like you're living a rich lifestyle. So getting back to the entrepreneurs in farming, it's wonderful. People are always out there tinkering, coming up with ideas. But again, how many people, Amito, are growing at home on their own? Not a lot. So I don't have to worry about becoming a millionaire overnight because a lot of people are demanding my systems or whatever. But I try to build things that work. I try to build them as cheaply as possible. And I try to make sure, more importantly, that they work, so that any aquaponics system I build for someone, that it works. But here goes the other side. It really relies on the owner's involvement in food. I want to say this, aquaponics is like having a dog. My fish get fed twice a day, 7 days a week. Someone's got to do it. I've been approached, well, why don't you just use an automated feeder? And I can do that. I can take some of that pressure off me. But I want to make sure that the fish and their health is doing well. In hydroponics, I don't have the fish, so it's a lot easier, but I got to make sure all the nutrients are in the water all the time and that the level of nutrients is right. So we have to test our water. So it's not like we're planting a seed in the ground and saying, dear God, help me. I need sunlight. I need rain. Make this seed grow into a plant. No, it's work. And there's lots of people who don't want to work. They work 10 to 12 hours at work. They want to come home and do what? Just relax. Have what little family life they can have. That's why the advent of fast food, that's why people want things that are easy. But easy is not always the best thing for us. That's really the issue. If ease was the best thing for our health and everything, we'd all do things that are easy. We started relaxing, and when we started relaxing as a society, we started getting fatter. We started getting unhealthier. So now we're into a little bit more exercise. We're more aware of the need to do that. We're trying to eat better, but we're not doing a great job. Processed food, that's one of the things that's the killer of us. Food that has been, I mean, I always tell people this. They have from the chart of food that you should eat, you should eat so many fruits and vegetables. They tell you to eat different colors and everything. It comes down to this. You want to eat things as raw and in a natural state as possible. Yeah, minimal cooking's fine, but if it's cooked and processed and done this too and that, it's bad. If you can't read the label of something that you're eating, if you don't know what everything is on that label, it's processed. It's not good for you. Processed foods are killing us. We need to go back a little bit and be more natural. And we can still have a little bit of processed food, but right now most people eat 80% of processed food. Maybe 20% would be much better. But how many people do you see? And I'm not saying you have to have a salad for everything. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you can't eat meat or have fish, but they talk about the Mediterranean diet. They talk about diets. I always say this. If you look at poor countries and poor people, they have the most ideal diet. It's not a lot of fat. Whatever comes up from the ground they're eating, they're minimally processing it. You're from the African continent. Isn't that how people eat?
Yeah, I mean, because I've first time I walked inside of a supermarket, I think was here in the U.S.
Right.
Because I mean, where I grew up, yeah, we were just poor. There were no supermarkets. Now, food was sparse. Like there was not a whole lot of it. And yeah, so oftentimes, yeah, we had to grow. We raised chicken, and then a lot of times you have to barter, and
Sure.
because you might have chicken, but then somebody else has onions and.
Yes. Got to
So I
barter.
was like, all right, how do we make this work? I got the chicken, you've got the
Right.
onions and the seasonings. Let's. But also I think as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking out loud, like with starting early. We have three girls, for example, like about like my older girl,
Right.
like she loves raw fruits and
Right.
vegetables. So the only fast food they've had is Chick-fil-A. Like they've never had McDonald's, never Wendy's, definitely not. And I remember like one time they went. Where did they go? It was like a party or something. We were not there, but they had KFC
Right.
and they got sick. I was happy, because they're like all sick. I'm like, yes, this is not working out for them.
Right.
This is good, because but I think we're also just fortunate to where we're able to eat, like you were talking earlier, like we eat at home with them at we home cooked meals, we eat dinner at home.
Right.
So they see that that might change whenever they are older.
Sure.
And like doing
when
high
they're
school and stuff
involved
like
in
that.
the other school activities, right?
Yeah, but also my wife and I, we've had this conversation about like, okay, we don't necessarily want to be just do stuff.
Right.
Again, this is also a very Western thing,
Yes.
right? That from early childhood up until they go off to college, everything is stuff.
Right. Their lives planned out.
Planned
right?
out.
Every second is accounted
Every
for,
second
right?
is accounted for.
Think of it: the travel soccer, the travel volleyball,
Yeah.
and that's to get them into good colleges and to maybe become professionals.
Yep.
Nothing wrong in that. But guess what? Very few, maybe 1/10% of people go to professional.
Yeah.
So what about the other 99.9%? What happens to them?
Yeah.
I don't know. We need to do things better. I think travel sports is great. I did sports when I was in high school, and I enjoyed it. It meant so much to me. But, I knew about eating good. My mom always made sure we always ate dinner every night, and she always made sure I ate breakfast every morning.
Every morning.
That to her was the most important meal, breakfast. And we'd have the family dinner. So times have changed. I get it. I have a 20-year-old. My youngest is in college now. She didn't always grow up with a cooked dinner in our household because she had activities. She had taekwondo. She had dance. She had other activities. She had tennis that she was involved in. And we couldn't always have that home-cooked meal then. But we'd have to have alternatives, and it doesn't always have to be fast food. It could be other things. One thing I see you do that a lot of people don't do anymore is you bring your lunch to work a lot. You can make choices then. When you're bringing your lunch, you can have good things in your lunch.
Which is oftentimes packing your own. Because I used to work for the news, right?
Right.
So working for the news, I spent all day in my news car. And unfortunately, they installed like inverters
Yes.
in our
yes,
cars.
Right.
So I was like, this is
You
perfect.
can plug it in.
Yeah, because I used to like pack my lunch, but then I would have to find like a gas station
Right.
that has like a microwave and awkwardly walk in there
Right.
and maybe like have to buy some,
Right. Right.
But then when they installed the inverters, I bought a crock pot and I would just put my lunch in there and I'll
Sure.
plug it in. But then when everybody else is eating like,
right. And they're seeing you in a crock pot. It's like, what's wrong with the Mito? Right?
yeah, and their food smells nice and you look
Right.
like a weirdo.
Yes,
But I'm like,
yes.
it's healthier, but also like I'm saving a lot of
Money, right? How about the monetary side of it
The
too?
monitor
right?
side, yeah. My wife and I, we got married right after college, and we were like like
Yep,
broke,
Right.
Broke.
Got it.
and oftentimes like we'd go hang out with friends, millennial friends, and they were like making exponentially more money than we are, but they were like all struggling, And I was just we'd go up and think about like, man, like what is wrong with this?
Right,
Like,
right. I'm not making money, but I'm not struggling
But
to
I'm
the
not
extent
struggling-
that
yeah.
they are, right?
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Yeah.
So there it is. I mean, it's choices, right? You and your wife made choices. And I think people have got to start making choices with their diets and with where their food comes. And if they want to take it to another level, they can start growing at home. And it doesn't have to be outside. It can be inside. What's easier than growing inside? I mean, here in Memphis, Memphis in the 1800s was the cotton capital of the world. All the world cotton was traded here in Memphis. And, you know, we had plantations and stuff like that. We go back to slave days in the U.S. I mean, it was awful, but we have a legacy that we're still trying to get over. When you ask people to grow, the first thing they think about is the cotton legacy that we had 150 years ago. No, that's a legacy we should be embracing and now taking it to a different level. Instead of cotton and slavery, we should be saying, I don't want to be the slave to non-nutritious food. I want to be a slave to nutritious food, and I do that by controlling what I eat and growing some of it myself inside the house. What's easier than inside the house? You're inside the house. I mean, today it's 100 degrees. We're in this building, and it's got to be maybe 73 degrees. It's 100 degrees outside now. I'm not asking you to farm outside in the heat and worry about bugs and weeds and everything. Bring it inside. You won't have the variety that you'll have outside. I admit that, but you can grow some things inside. And it's just picking and choosing. Yes, you'll always have to depend on the grocery store. That's where we are in America. Unless you're ready to go off into the woods and do things and have a farm and live off grid. I mean, that's wonderful. But I mean, most people aren't going to do that. Most people who are listening won't do that. But take a step in the right direction to try to make a few changes. And then as you find how easy those are, expand it. Make another few changes. And do like your kids. Tell your kids the reason why you got sick was you were at a party. You weren't used to all the grease in the KFC chicken. You weren't used to all the additives in the KFC chicken. Doesn't make KFC bad now. I'm not trying to badmouth them. But your kids weren't used to it. Their bodies reacted. They got sick. When you eat more natural, I mean, when I go past the fast food place, the first thing I smell is the grease.
The grease, yep.
It's not that it smells good or bad. I just smelled the grease. And I go, wow, what is that smell? And I go, oh, it's the grease. So we have to do better, and we have to just back down from the processed foods. We have to just be as natural as we can. And if we could get to raw's quick. I mean, here it is. You chop it up, you eat it. That's it. But we're used to, we got to have all these different flavors and everything. The last thing that we've got to get used to is this is something that 100 years ago people didn't even think about. You wouldn't think about having a tomato unless it was in a canned, when I say canned, meaning in a jar, right? That you had put up in the summer. But now, if I want a strawberry in the middle of wintertime, I expect it to come from South America. If I want a kiwi, it's coming from maybe not California, but it's coming from Australia. If I want a South American wine now, I go to the store and ask for a South American wine. We've got to get more into getting back to the foods that we can grow in our area and just sticking to that. Yeah, well, we can put things up and put things out by canning things and doing things like that, but we have to think differently. Do we have to have every possible flavor and every possible food all year round? I don't know.
So, and I'd be interested in here. I mean, even just people watching this, if you want to just drop it down in the comment section. But Daryl, what do you think it's going to take? Because, you know, with agritech, that's kind of what I've committed to. I was like, okay, this is going to be a very slow conversation, but eventually the point is I want to change the narrative, but also like change people's habit to show them that it's not impossible,
right? And
it's not like rocket science. You know, it's just small changes at a time. Eventually we'll get to a point where we need to be as a society. But, you know, just how do you think we're going to get there? Like, what is it going to take?
It'll take like, so when the war in Ukraine started between Russia and Ukraine, what was one of the first things that happened? The prices of food went right through the roof. Do you know why? Most of the fertilizer components that are used in fertilizer throughout the world come from either Russia that borders Ukraine or Ukraine that borders Russia. One of the people who works in this building said, this war's breaking out. Cost of food's going up because the cost of fertilizer components are going up. And that's what happened. I think as we see more disasters, and I want to say this, I go to farmers markets and I take a look at the people who are going to farmers markets. They're younger folks. They're younger folks who are not as materialistic and don't have to have the great car or the great clothes, but they'll have better food. And I think as more people see them and see the happiness that they have and see the lifestyles that they have that are not as cluttered or whatever, are not as materialistic, they want to have a good time, but it's not about always having just things. They want to have good food. They want to have good friends, good relationships. I think as our society goes that way, that the food thing will come with it. I think that you look at Europe. Europe's been like that for a while. Europe has always been. I was a kid. I was blessed to live in France for 3.5 years. First time I saw a farmer's market. My mom would buy from the farmer's market every week. We'd have the freshest produce every week. Ours was on a Saturday, and it was around the corner from where we lived. We lived over a bicycle shop, and it was great. But I mean, people in Europe, and they've been around for thousands of years longer than we have in America, are just different. They have a different lifestyle. They have lots of vacation. They have lots of time together. They have lots of family time. Like in Amsterdam and the Netherlands, they ride bicycles to work. Here, if you don't have a car, we don't have good public transportation. Yeah. So I think as we get more into a societal shift away from materialistic things, more into having time with family and stuff, that the food will come with it. I just think what has to happen first, I think they both have to happen together, but I think it's that shift. I see the shift, but here it is. And then comes the other side of it, because I'm African American. We as black people lagged. We lag with food access now via food justice. We lag in wanting to have a lifestyle where we just hang out together. But I see more and more younger black people not wanting that materialistic, I've got to do all the right things, or I've got to go to all the Beyonce concerts and everything. I just want, not that they don't want to go to concerts now, but they just want to just have a simpler lifestyle. And I think as we, as people of color, make that shift too, we'll see a better quality of living, better lifestyle, and less medical issues. Mm-hmm. But we've got to make the shift. So I think society's got to make the shift, and that food will come with it. That's what I really believe will happen.
That's what I hope to see happen.
This has been great, Amita.
Thank you so much. And I guess, as we, because I'll talking to like outdoor growers, backyard growers, and even just people who are impacted by the food desert in our city and stuff like that. So I don't know, in the future I might just, record another episode with you.
Sounds great. Follow-up. And let's see how things have progressed. And let's give, what I'd love for you to do in your podcast, Amito, is to focus on people who are making a difference like that. You will know, because we talk about where agriculture is going. There are hot spots of it all throughout the city of Memphis where you have one person, she's working on teas. You have one person who's working on chickens. I know a person who makes soaps. They make their own soap. It doesn't have all the other things that give us allergies and things like that. And guess what it doesn't have? A lot of perfume. We don't need the perfume in the soap, but we've been taught that we need it. I don't know. But we have hot spots all throughout the city of Memphis where there's good activity going on. Again, will it be commercialized overnight? No. But can more people get involved and do it? Of course. And people who look like us too. And that's what's important.
All right. Thank you so much, Daryl.
Thank you.
And so how are you on social media? How can people find you?
I can be reached. So New Way Aquaponic Farm. So it's New, Newway, Aquaponic, Aquaponic Farms, FARMS.com. It's the easiest way to get me.
All right. Thank you so much, Daryl.
Thank you, Amita.
All right.